This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Donny Fandango, Jeff Burton, Alex Ferrario, and former Blues defenseman Jamie Rivers.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast. Donny Fandango, joined in studio by Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN and Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic. Guys, you'll be happy to know that the very first time that we sat in here, I was not happy with my intro to you about you guys at all, and so I've worked on it.
Have you?
Yeah, because I was like, man, these two dudes are awesome, and I got to give them a great setup. And the very first time that I did it, I did not think my setup was awesome, so I just wanted to make sure, man, that I, gave you proper credit, and it kind of rolled off the tongue.
It's always been awesome. Now you want to make me go back and listen to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, now I'm going to have to listen. I can actually picture Donnie in his bathroom mirror in the morning before he comes in, like, coming up next, Alex Ferrario, 101 ESPN, and Jeremy Rutherford. No, that was crap. Let's do it again.
Well, it's in the car, but yeah, you got the right idea.
You got the right bathroom mirror, doesn't matter.
So I have to tell you that as we do this podcast on Tuesday morning at 9:17, I am my brain is filled with nothing but Buffalo Bill negativity.
Good.
So anything in which that I can do to move on and to not think about that game last night, to not think about how disappointing this season has been, to not think about all of the, I think one of the things I kept thinking about last night as I was watching the game, and it kind of relates to the Blues a little bit, like, it's one thing to get good, but that's almost kind of the easy part. But there's another level after good that the Bills have never been able to attain. And getting to that level is just, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take.
So now's not a good time to remind you that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs helped me lose in fantasy football.
Okay,
yesterday.
Now listen, I'm going to say this, and I love you, Alex,
okay, with
all of my heart.
Okay.
I could give 6 craps about your fantasy team. And I had somebody on Twitter last night, I know how you feel, Donnie. I had on my fantasy team. I think you're a nice person, but shut up. Like, I don't understand. And then when I see Ken Dorsey, when they go into the booth and they show Ken Dorsey, there's just venom coming out of my mouth. And then I don't.
If the listeners could just see the veins right now.
I was going to say, so it wasn't a good time to bring that up. Okay, good. Now I know next time.
I don't know. It's worse to bring up that or Nickelback when you did that.
Well, not washing your hands.
Nah, Nickelback is fine.
The washing the hands?
There we go. That's touching the nerve.
Speaking of which, there's a radio station meal tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a Thanksgiving.
Yeah, this is the potluck that we were speaking of.
Donnie won't be in attendance.
No, dude, no way. I'm bringing a ham sandwich, and I'm not even lying. So last night, I got in trouble with Mary because I hadn't yelled at the TV in a bit, and that changed in the second half. And so she got on me a little bit, totally deserved. So a little bit later on, we're laying in bed, we're cuddling, and whatever. She's like, in the girl voice, "What are you thinking about?" And I was like, "Honey, I'm thinking about that amazing Burger King commercial where you can get the half a order of fries and half of onion rings in one thing. That's brilliant, honey. Why isn't that not everywhere?" And she just loses it and just starts friggin' cracking up. She was like, "That's what you're thinking of?" And I was like, "Yeah, honey, that sounds delicious right now. Tell me you would not want that." And so that made her laugh, and she was like, "Well, then I guess you're not that mad about the game." And I was like, "Oh no, honey, don't get it twisted. I'm still burning on the inside. I'm just still funny while I'm miserable."
I thought that was going to segue into adventures in the bedroom, and her's thinking that way, and Donnie's like, "Man, I'm thinking about a Burger King burger right now with onion rings, and I'm thinking I'm hungry," and then the whole mood just changes.
Yeah, she might have. I don't know.
But instead, you made the mood even more lighter.
Yeah, man.
We made it a funny situation, but don't you guys find yourself sometimes you have to make up something on the fly, just like you're kind of saying there, where you were thinking about something that maybe she didn't do or she could have done differently or helped things out, and she says, "What are you thinking?" And you're like, well, you know what? I got a dentist appointment next Tuesday, and just thinking about it, I really don't want to go.
And it's like the Freudian slip. What do you think? Well, I'm thinking you should have told me what you wanted for dinner, and I would have cooked that one tonight.
Dude, I'll tell you the biggest thing that I think that I have learned over the course of the last handful of years in Mary and I's relationship is the choosing and the picking of your battles, and how incredibly incredibly important that is to any relationship.
I just never pick battles. I'm just like, nah, not worth it.
My problem is I pick everyone.
That's kind of my problem there, JR. I do the same, man. I do the same.
Mine's like, she's like, well, if you're upset about it, we could talk. I'm like, nah, who cares? And then I think about it for 15 more minutes. I'm like, son of a, damn, that does piss me off.
But you know what, though? You know what I do? You know what? The Blues are playing well.
Amen to that.
You know? So at least I got that to fall back on.
I came home the happiest I've ever been after Saturday's game.
Boy, what an ass whooping.
Yeah.
What an absolute ass whooping. And let me tell you my favorite part about the whole thing. And I didn't see this until a couple of days ago, but I've watched it a few times since. When Braden Shin gives Craig Berube the game puck and congratulates him on his 200th career win.
Mm-hmm.
There was in so many parts of our lives that sometimes the things that we see are fake and phony. And that was genuine appreciation and happiness and love in that room amongst those guys for Coach Berube. I loved and on top of it, like Chief looked like it, you know what I mean? Like it looked like it meant something. Well, you know, man, like the emotional part of it. I just thought that it was incredibly, incredibly beautiful. And also, too, if there's any questions about if this is Berube's team or not, answered, done, in the grave.
Well, that's the thing. And I think the Blues do a great job, especially on social media with those videos. And it goes back with Craig Berube back to that Stanley Cup Game 7 against Boston video. I mean, if they don't have that speech recorded, oh, my gosh. Like, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. I will run through a wall right now if I hear that speech
I still
again.
get goosebumps listening to that speech.
But a lot of times you'll see these post-game videos, and I think you're right, Donnie. It does. Even the media lets us inside to see what happens. We don't see that on a normal basis. And so to see Braden Shen present the puck, 200 wins, I got to do my Chief imitation. Oh, okay, thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Sometimes, he doesn't know that the milestone's coming up, but and then to see his reaction, which I thought was genuine, and some of my first thoughts, we traded text last night, Donnie, is that I hear so many people, well, the message is getting stale. They don't like this guy, his whatever he's teaching, it's just not resonating. And it's like, come on, people. Like, a lot of this team wasn't even around 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's changed so different. And guys like Braden Shen are the guys who have been there since the Stanley Cup, obviously, and you see the love and respect he has for Craig Berube.
I heard Randy Carricker talk about this yesterday morning, and I'm very interested to get you guys' perspective on this. He gave Coach Berube a mountain of credit for being able to develop young players.
Oh, yeah.
And I was kind of thinking about that, and I'm like, Robert Thomas, we all I was worried, bringing him along slow, It was a perfect pace. Seems like it's been the same for Kyrou. So then to me, man, that just gives me all kinds of hope for the next rung of Jake Neighbors and then of whomever else is next, that he is going to be a great guy for a young player.
This is why when people, it irritates the hell out of me when it gets to the point where it's, well, Craig Berube can't coach this team, or it's got too much skill and Craig Berube's a physical coach. If you look at the development of the younger players that he's had his hands on, I mean, start all the way back with Ivan Barbashev. He had Ivan Barbashev with the Chicago Wolves, and Barbashev was a top-line center for him when he was in the AHL. And what did he finish that one season? He had like 60 points or something in the AHL. And then he comes to the NHL, and he's a fourth liner and graduates towards being a third liner, a second liner. And then he has the season prior to him being traded where he put up like 60-something points. But Toropchenko has developed now into a guy that you can rely upon. You mentioned Thomas. You've got Jordan Kyrou. Look at the defenseman side of things with Tyler Tucker and the continued development of some of these guys, and the goaltender side of things. Like, his coaching staff has their hands on all of these younger players that are growing. It's tough to find those coaches that have that massive of an impact on young players that develop into something, especially guys that are drafted in the late first round, second round. Now think of him having his ability to groom Dalibor Dvorsky and Jimmy Snuggerud, and with Jake Neighbors and Zachary Bolduc and Zach Dean. Like, this prospect pool is full right now, at least with the forwards, and you've got a coach who knows how to develop these players into what they should be.
Yeah, and here's the thing with Berube, and this is why he's been able to make the transition from 1,000 games in the NHL as a player to coaching and now 200 wins with the St. Louis Blues, is he's a communicator. I know that word sometimes gets thrown around a lot. He's a good communicator. Okay, what's it mean? Well, being in the Blues locker room for a long time, I've been around where coaches didn't talk to the players and tell them what they needed to do better. They just expected it, and the player was supposed to interpret what the coach wanted, and sometimes they misinterpreted, didn't do the things that he wanted. But, just kind of making up a situation on the fly here is you would go up to Robert Thomas and say, man, you're playing 12 minutes last night. The other night you were playing 16, 17. What happened? Well, Chief came up to me in the morning skate and said he wants to see this, this, and this. I said, how important is that to you? He said, phenomenal. Like, a lot of times you don't get that. And obviously, Berube's the only coach he's had in the NHL, but I think it's a situation where they know and they hear their friends around the league talk about the coaches that they're dealing with. Craig Berube's really good at that, and it's not just him. Typically, it's his staff, too. You'll see a lot of the assistant coaches. Alex, you see it. Morning skate, they take the ice, they're doing their laps, and what do you see? The assistant coaches right in the ear of some of these guys.
I always say, like, if you fire a coach because a team's underperforming, you're going to spend the next however many years finding the next coach. Edmonton right now, they just fired Jay Woodcroft. That is their 6th coach that they've had since Connor McDavid was drafted, and 2 general managers. Like, you're always searching for that next coach. Colorado, for how dominant they are, and I think Jared Bednar is one of the best coaches in the league. But remember, they went through Patrick Waugh, they went through a couple of other coaches to get to Jared Bednar. So when you get rid of a coach, this is why you don't get rid of one that has the skills to develop young players, has the system in place that works when you have the right players with it, and he gets the best out of those players. And to your point of communicating, and this goes back, with TJ Oshie, you remember Oshie talking about what was the word he used? It was like overstimulated.
Stimulated because of video.
All the numbers and all the videos that Ken Hitchcock and his staff are throwing at him. And that's no shot at Ken Hitchcock, but that was a guy who kind of did the old school route where it was like, figure out what we're talking about, and the assistants did a lot of it, where now your head coach is not doing that.
Yeah, I remember we walked up to Oshie's stall one day, and I said, you missed the last couple of days with the flu. Do you feel better? And he said, yeah, a little refreshed, not watching 2 days worth of video.
Yeah. And I remember everybody lost their mind about it. It was like, oh my God, TJ Oshie's not understanding what the coaching. It's like, no, that's not what this is. The game changed into what it is now, to where the communication aspect of it is a lot more important with the coaching staff.
I want to go back to the Blues in a second here, guys. But if you are Ken Holland and you are in charge of the Edmonton Oilers, what are you going to do? And I see people talk about, maybe the breaking up of McDavid and Draisaitl. But to me, man, like, we talked about this last week. You went into the season with Jack Campbell as your freaking number 1 goaltender. Like, until you get a goalie on that team, dude, I feel like you're just going to be treading water. Is that wrong to say? How do you think that goes up there?
No, I agree with you. The only thing is, when you have the cap and you have those 2 expensive players, you have some other guys, you're hoping that Skinner can be that guy, and he showed that he kind of could, and you're kind of banking on that a little bit, and then you bring in Campbell. They're just decisions that they make that probably aren't the best decisions, and obviously they didn't turn out well. So, yeah, I think you don't even have to say in hindsight, yes, if you have that team together and it's a Stanley Cup contender, you got to put a better goalie in the net. But they're just not that easy to find, which we talked about last week.
Right.
And it's not even just McDavid and Draisaitl, because, look, I'll pay
Nurse
$23 million to those 2 guys. But, yeah, Darnell Nurse is making $9.5 million. I'm looking this up. What did they pay? They're paying Evander Kane $5.125. They're paying Zach Hyman $5.5 million. They've got Nugent Hopkins at $5.125. And then you also traded for Matthias Ekholm, who's making $6 million. So, it's the NHL. It's the salary cap. You pay your best guys a load of money, so that's going to take a much of the salary cap. But as much as people complain about the Blues and all of the money tied up on defense, you've got $15.5 million tied up in 2 defensemen, and you've got your top 6, which is basically eating $40 million in the cap. So, like, that's $60 million, and the cap's at what, 88 right now?
No, 83.5.
83. So, we're talking about like 5 or 6 players on this team that's eating up more than half of your team. That's the equivalent of you rostering a bunch of minimum salaries on your bottom 6, and your bottom 4 defense are minimum salaries, and your goaltender. Like, it's not an easy team to put it together if you're doing all of that.
Man, oh man. That's just, and we talked about it last week too, that's just always going to forever be a team, probably because of Gretzky, probably because it's in Edmonton, that I'm just always going to kind of have an eye on and a little bit of an affinity for. Jeremy, last night I read your fantastic article in The Athletic last week, an interview with Scott Perunovich. I got to tell you that kid seems to be saying exactly all of the right things that you could ever possibly want to hear. Like, there doesn't seem to be a single bit of complainer in that kid at all. It seems to be like, it is what it is. I got to work. I got to make my place. I'm here to do it. It seemed as positive as a dude could be that is spent as much time in the press box this year as he has.
Yeah, first of all, he's a great kid. You know, he comes from Hibbing, Minnesota, which we know by now after the tragedy there in Hibbing, and he was friends with Adam Johnson. Yep. And I think in talking and working with Scott Perunovich for a couple years now, we did a training camp diary a few years ago where every day he submitted something that happened to him that day that we could use for a diary. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and he comes from a good family. And I knew when he spoke last week at his stall that the 2 or 3 reporters converged on his locker, that he's going to say the right things, right? Because first of all, he's respectful. Second of all, he wants to get and stay in the lineup, and he's not going to be an issue, a problem. He just wants to play. Like, I did a piece on him last year when he came back from these injuries, and he was like, you know, first couple injuries, a little bit fluky. Third one's on me. I just want to be in the lineup. So he works and he overcomes all that mental challenges of saying, I can play in the NHL even if people don't think I can. Well, now he comes to camp. He's healthy. He's ready. But the Blues have 8 defensemen. So how does he get into the lineup? So he finally does. But, Donny, you know, you can't have a situation where you're thinking that first mistake is going to put you in the press box. Yeah. You just want to stretch of games. That's what he wanted. And I thought he eloquently told us that last week.
It's wild to think about because let's say 2 years ago he doesn't get injured, one of those fluke injuries that he talked about. You're probably talking about him progressing to the point that the Blues are like, hey, we're seeing something here. Maybe they don't trade for Nick Leddy that offseason, and Scott Perunovich the next season is probably an everyday guy that's continuing to grow. That's just the fluke injuries and how they impact your career. At least in these last couple of games, I don't really take into the 11 forwards and 7 defensemen game under evaluation with him because it's so tough as a defenseman when there's 7 of you. You're only used in specific situations. You're not out there at 5-on-5 consistently. Man, that game against Colorado and then the other one against Arizona, the way that he controlled the puck and moved the puck at 5-on-5, I felt like he deserves a sustained look right now. Like, offensively, it's going to come. Driving some offense, specifically that Arizona game, it felt like at least Corsi rating, if you go off of that, which is puck possession measurement, it was on his side pretty much the entire night. So the offense will come, but defensively, he's making the right moves. And Craig Berube talked about it's all about puck transition. It's all about zone exits. If you're doing that quickly, you're playing in this lineup, and he's been doing it.
Well, and it goes back to what we were saying just a bit ago about Coach Berube being upfront and honest with his players. I mean, saying bluntly, hey, man, you had to come in to training camp and take a spot. We don't think that you did that. I mean,
yeah,
that is tough to hear, but, man, you know, I mean, it's the challenge to get yourself back in there. What do you think he has to do to consistently be in the lineup?
Be consistent, and it has to do a lot with with playing well in his own defensive zone. Because we all know he can handle the puck. We all know that he can handle the power play, but he's got to play well in his defensive zone. But here's the question that I want to pay attention to going forward is, what are they going to do? Because you're trying to give Tyler Tucker some experience. You gave him a long stretch of games early in the season. Now you're giving that to Scott Perunovich. It looks like he's kind of taken off with it a little bit. What are you going to do with Tyler Tucker? Because you can't put him on waivers and send him to Springfield. He'd get picked up probably. But now you're competitive. You've won 4 out of 5, and Scandella's helping you. You got to keep in the lineup. I think they're okay with keeping Bortuzzo out. He'll just fill in when needed. But what do you do with this Tyler Tucker, Scott Perunovich thing? Maybe it's going to be a game-by-game basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be. I think right now your team – if you look at and segment it, the first 8 games, you weren't scoring any offense. I mean, your team, you put the tweet out, JR. I mean, you were averaging like 1.2 goals a game. Now, in 5 games, you're averaging 4.2 goals per game. I'm not saying that's all Scott Perunovich, but why mess up the chemistry right now when it's working? And a third pair defenseman, you're playing 12, 13 minutes a night. Maybe it doesn't make that much of a difference. But I personally view this as Tyler Tucker is going to go through the same thing Scott Perunovich went through, where you're going to sit probably for 12, 13 games and not get in the lineup. You're going to have to watch from up top until something happens. But, man, the flow right now on defense is working really well. And we're talking about a team that's being stingy on the defensive side, but now is creating offense. I just don't think you touch it.
All right. So last night, NHL, the Hall of Fame induction happens last night. and I have a question to start before we get into Coach Hitchcock and Pierre Turgeon making it into the Hall of Fame. I obviously, huge Pierre Turgeon fan when I was a kid, an amazing player, but it makes, and I've talked to Jamie about this a bunch of months ago, it makes absolutely zero sense to me, zero sense that somebody like him is in the Hall of Fame and Alexander Mogilny is not in the Hall of Fame. I don't understand that, even in the freaking slightest. And even after talking to Jamie a little bit more, I didn't realize how much of Mogilny's literal life was spent being afraid of the Russian government for defecting. So on top of being an amazing player and one of the greatest Russian players that ever came, guys, that makes no sense to me. Why he is not in there? None.
Yeah, I don't know the argument against him. And we're not in the room, right? And I think
and they don't ever have to talk.
They don't have to talk. Yeah. There's 16, 17 people in the room, and they change every few years, and he still doesn't get in. But we do kind of a mock Hall of Fame for the Athletic every year, and every year he's one of our 4 guys that's going in.
Which he should be.
Which he should be, and I don't have an answer for you.
That's so crazy. But, I remember as a kid watching Tom Barrasso on 64 different teams. And I had no idea that he came right out of high school to the NHL. Fascinating, man. There's so many of these things. But I specifically want to start with Coach Ken Hitchcock, because it seems to me that, that 2019 Stanley Cup team, obviously coached by Chief, but man, the foundation of some of that is with Hitch. And I love listening to that guy talk about hockey. I just freaking love it. And you guys both got to kind of interact and get to know him and that sort of thing. Can you just kind of talk about Hitch the guy?
I mean, I know JR is going to have more stories than me, because I just started, 2013 was when I started covering the team for KMOX, and so I got a bulk of it, but I didn't get all of it. I mean, listening to how structured his answers were on the key points of hockey. The dude just loved hockey, everything about it. He would talk about the books that he read. What I used to love most was at the end of practices, he would stand up there in his Ken Hitchcock hockey jersey, sweater, and he would stand there, he would answer all the questions, the television people would leave, a couple of others would just leave, and it would be me, JR, Lou, a couple of others, and he would just sit down in his chair and he would just start talking hockey. It would be like an open session where he would just take questions from everybody.
Yeah, we called it the fireside chat.
Yeah, that's exactly. He would just sit there, and I mean, this guy would talk. I used to have to leave because it's man, I'm going to be late. He would talk for an hour.
100%. So Donnie, just to
how awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Add even more context to what he's saying. He's spot on here. Is in the NHL, the coaches come out, they go to the podium, the 7 or 8 reporters ask a few questions. The second you're done with the last answer, boom, coach is gone. The first couple times that Hitch did that, Alex, you probably remember, he'd finish up at the podium, we'd start to stand up and grab our recorders and walk out of the room, and all of a sudden, Hitch would be grabbing a chair, setting it down in front of him and goes, all right, guys, pull up a chair. And we're so we'd make a circle of chairs and stand there. Now, this stuff was off the record, but he knew it could help you with your articles. But, Alex, no reason to name names, but you'd say, hey, coach, so-and-so played 6 straight games, but he hasn't played the last couple. What's going on? He goes, he can't play. and you're like, what do you mean he can't play? Well, you watch him, he can't skate. And you're like, you're kidding me. And Alex, there were so many times where I was so regretful because my boss is texting and he wants me to do a chat at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, or I had to go do an interview and I would have to get up and walk out and Hitch would, where are you going? It's I can't believe I'm walking out of this.
He's asking where you're going. I mean, the dude was just full of knowledge. I mean, every single time he would break plays down. I'll never forget in one of the post-game scrums, I forgot who asked the question, but they asked a specific question about why the play went the way it did. And Hitch would, he looked, he goes, wow, you know hockey about as well as I do. And I'm like, man, that's like the feather in the cap for that reporter. Yeah. I'll tell you, though, my favorite story, and I'm sure you remember this, JR, was the player, he was a hard ass, but the players loved playing for him. And Ryan Reeves, after a Ken Hitchcock scrum, he came out with a pillow stuffed in his jacket and stood up there and acted like Ken Hitchcock. Whole voice, he was like, all right, boys, what questions we got today? Fire away, folks. and then Hitch would walk out and see Ryan Reeves and be like, what the hell is this? It was amazing.
No, go ahead, JR.
No, just a couple quick ones. Real quick is that I remember sitting in the lower bowl with Ken Hitchcock watching practice because he didn't go out for all the practices and skate with the team. He'd kind of sit in the seats every once in a while. I'm sitting right next to him. And whenever I would get asked about Jordan Binnington and his odds of making it to the NHL, I kind of poo-pooed it. I would say, yeah, I just don't think so. That's a complete long shot. And part of the reason I couldn't say it was because I sat next to Ken Hitchcock for one of those practices, and Jordan Binnington let a couple in, and Ken's sitting next to me, and he goes, Swiss cheese. This goalie's Swiss cheese. All the pucks are getting by him. I don't think he's going to make it. And eventually, obviously, he did.
Yeah.
But I'm listening to Ken Hitchcock say, he can't stop the puck. And then the one I'll never forget, too, is, again, NHL reporters are so used to the secrecy of the head coaches, they won't say anything. I had to put together what I thought was going to be the lineup later that night for the game, the projected lineup. And sometimes I'd get to my laptop and I'd say, oh, man, who are they going to put at left wing? If they move him, if he plays, what's going to happen? And so I had a Chicago Blackhawk reporter sitting next to me who got no help from his coach. And I dial up Ken Hitchcock, and I go, hey, Hitch, yeah. And we literally just got done talking to him 20 minutes ago, but I didn't figure out the lineup. And I said, hey, so if Brouwer plays right wing on that line, then who's going to play second line left wing? Oh, that'll be so-and-so. And I hang up with him, and the reporter next to me is, you got to be kidding me.
Can you imagine Hitch sitting at his desk going over the schemes for the night's game with his assistants? Hang on, guys. JR's calling.
What's the lineup?
I'll say this, too. I interviewed him in 2020 for one of the shows on 101 ESPN, and the part that got me was I asked about his time in St. Louis, and he said, we ran into two hot goaltenders. He said, I truly believe, and I'll die believing this, we would have won 2 cups in St. Louis while I was head coach. Wow. The year that they went to the Western Conference Final, but he said also the year that they got, I think it was Chicago with Corey Crawford, where they got bounced in the first round. He said those are 2 years that I thought we had the best team to win Stanley Cups, and we just ran into a hot goaltender.
So then, guys, tell me, obviously tons of respect for this guy, a lot of like for the guy. But then we go back a little bit earlier in the podcast, and we hear these stories about like TJ Oshie, who by all accounts is an amazing player, amazing teammate, whole thing. But there was a part of Hitch that, did the Hitch message get old? Did he just get to be too much? Like, what ended up being the problem? Why wasn't he the guy here when the Blues won in 2019?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a shelf life for NHL coaches, and Hitch definitely has one, and I think he does rub guys the wrong way a lot. He might not see it that way. Maybe he sees it that way, but he thinks that's what's necessary to get you to the level that he wants you to play at. But, I mean, I can't count the number of times that players came up to me in a hallway, on a plane, at a hotel, and said they literally wanted to rip his head off. And, like, your fingers would start to tweet, veteran player wants to rip. I can't do that. Yeah. So you back off it. But, yeah, I mean, just the methods to get you and push you to the level that he wanted you at is not the ways they wanted to be pushed sometimes. Or a lot of times.
Yeah. Most of the time.
And also, too, though, it's sort of a... Hitch came through here at sort of the changing of the coaching guard. It was kind of like a weird mix between the old school guys that were still hanging around, which he would have been one, and then some of the new school guys that would have probably incorporated the players' feelings a bit more, been more conversational, been more open, that kind of thing. So it was kind of a kind of a transitional time in coaching, I feel like, too.
And that was the best thing about Hitch, and I know there's probably some ex-Blues that played for him who disagree with this, but he tried to evolve with the game. So he went through that era where you told the players what to do, and then he was suddenly coaching in this era where the players wanted to know why are we doing that, how, what's the deal here. And he would go to the clinics and he'd be part of these seminars where then he kind of had to learn that, okay, that's what they want, that's what I need to give them. Did he perfect that? I don't know, but from what I saw is he was a guy who was trying to evolve with the game and provide the players with that.
And I think when you ask the question why it didn't work, I think it's the same thing that we heard Doug Armstrong talk this past offseason about, like having to figure out how to communicate with the younger generation. And I think when Hitch was here, when this time started to end, it was the transition into that younger group of players that were starting to become a little bit more veteran-esque, that were trying to understand things where Ken Hitchcock was evolving, the players were evolving, and it just wasn't working, to where you had a coach in Craig Berube, who I know he was hired after Mike Yeo, but they had Mike Yeo in place, who they felt like, okay, he's a little bit of the younger generation. He'll be able to kind of communicate this. At least that's my perspective. I mean, you see it in the NHL all the time. You got guys that are head coaches that you're like, okay, well, maybe this works. John Tortorella is a perfect example. It's working in Philly right now, but when does it stop working? When does that message become, okay, well, this isn't the message we need to continue to pursue? Anaheim. How many guys have Anaheim gone through of head coaches trying to figure it out? And this Greg Cronin, Joey talks about him all the time because it was an assistant coach at Northeastern. Joey says this is one of the best communicators in hockey. So, like, you're starting to see that, and I just think it fizzled out with Ken Hitchcock.
Yeah. I mean, which pardon me, which totally makes sense.
I mean, he went to Edmonton, didn't he? Yeah, he went to Edmonton after the Blues,
right.
And, again, that fizzled out.
Yeah. Wow. So tonight, Blues in home against the Lightning, and then a big, long Western road trip is happening. So these Lightning, can we talk about them a little bit? I know that that the goaltender, Vasilevsky, is injured, even though I did see him on the ice yesterday skating. But talk about this Lightning team. What do the Blues have in store for him tonight?
This is an interesting one for me because they're not the same dominant Tampa Bay Lightning team that they've always been, but they still have some of the best players in the game. Like, they still got Stamkos, Kucherov, Hedman. I think it's Johansson is the goaltender that they've been using, but they've kind of been going through a couple of different guys. They're always a dangerous team. You started this month, and I personally thought that, man, you might be in for a world of hurt for the Blues because – I mean, you were going on an 8 to 10 game stretch where it was tough after tough after tough, and you've won 4 of the 5 games right now, and you take on a Tampa Bay team, and then after that you play Western Conference teams the rest of the way. But, I mean, Tampa's probably just as identical to the New Jersey Devils when you played against them. I'd say they're pretty identical to the Colorado Avalanche in terms of you got an okay goaltender, you got a really good defense, and it's just a matter of finding ways to eliminate their offensive weapon. But, I mean, you got to give props to the Blues right now. At 5-on-5, they're not allowing anything. And these aren't just schlub teams that they've gone up against. They're not allowing much to New Jersey, to Montreal, to Arizona. Even Winnipeg didn't have a whole lot in store other than one period. So I don't think it really matters who the team is that comes in.
Yeah, what I see now, Donnie, with this Blues team is just the confidence and the willingness to play for each other. That's something that we talked about at the start of the season. It's really coming to fruition here lately. You can see the camaraderie with this group that we didn't see at any point last year. And, you know, you don't want to say you didn't see it at the start of this year. It just didn't have time to develop. But now I think it's starting to develop, and their game's starting to come around. So the first 8 games of the year, when we were talking about they had no offense, they averaged 25 shots on goal per game. I looked the other day and crunched it. The last 5 games in which they've won 4, they're up to 34 shots a game, so almost 9 more shots a game. And I said that to Craig Berube yesterday. I said, hey, 9 more shots. And he said, yeah, but it's not just the shots, it's how we're getting the shots. And, the passing is crisp, and we're getting the pucks on net, and there's rebounds, and now there's guys sitting in front willing to do that. So the goals are up now, too. I think they're 4.4 in this 5-game stretch, which is 3rd in the NHL in those 5 games. So small sample size, but if you're a Blues fan 2 weeks ago, you would take this right. So it's been a lot better. So yeah, you got Tampa 6-5-1, I think I see on the standings here. Then you got a San Jose team that you should wallop. And then
God, I'm so worried about playing a San Jose team because you don't want to be like the Edmonton Oilers where you lose to them and it's like, geez, here we go again.
Right, take it for granted sort of thing.
Then an up-and-coming Anaheim team. You mentioned Cronin, the head coach, on Sunday. And then next week against Arizona. So, gosh, how many times have they played Arizona?
I know.
Yeah, no
welcome
kidding.
Back to the bubble, it seems like.
And also, too, you know what? We can talk real quick. This is silliness, and this is just me being dumb. But, like, I appreciate that arena is a college arena and that it's so cool, that it's so small. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. It's pathetic. They need to be in an NHL friggin' arena. And also, too, at this point, it just seems like the NHL is hell freaking bent on making it work in Arizona. So let's just something. Just something. Can they just play at a big boy arena for the love of people?
I really can't wait till a playoff series happens and they're playing in
would be
with
nuts.
3,000 people. They can't even accommodate all of the media. Like, imagine them if for some odd reason they would go on some run and get to a Western Conference final. You can't even accommodate those people. And I've seen those Western Conference final games.
If you're a player, how does that not embarrass the bejesus out of you?
Yeah.
That is your home ice.
I think it does, from what I've heard, though, and we're talking about a college campus and one of the best.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's Arizona.
I've heard that they don't mind it.
Yeah.
They're going to get through it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a college campus up in Winnipeg right now,
But this will be my second trip when I go next week. And I've sat there for one, and you guys can picture this. So you've got like a small lower bowl, right? I mean, super small. But then there's like a railing with a little, maybe 6-inch ledge. That's the desk for press row. So I put my laptop on this little ledge, and the right in front of me are the seats. Well, I always self-deprecate, right? Give myself trouble for being a big guy. This feller that was sitting in front of me was about the size of a Tyson chicken truck in front of me. I literally had to step to the side to be able to watch the game. So anyway,
Oh my God,
when
that's
you go
crazy.
when you go to 31 rinks, visiting rinks, you're used to being in a press box. This is not a press box.
I'll tell you.
JR felt like Buddy the Elf in the shower.
Dude, when I was in Detroit last week and at Little Caesars Arena, it was, and I had been there very briefly before because my son and I had been in Detroit. And we went into the little like fan shop or whatever, but I had a chance to really kind of go around. And they have done such an amazing job of making that almost not feel like an arena when you're in the concourse. Mm-hmm. Like it's like you're in a mall or a restaurant or something. It's beautiful.
That's the Taj Mahal, that place.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then also, too, and I told you this, it was very crazy to be walking through the concourse and to see one of those banners for Jake Waldman. And no disrespect to Jake. I like Jake when he was here. I'm glad that he's doing well in Detroit. But it was just like, I did not know that he was a foundational Red Wing.
You probably felt you were at a Blues home game because they got a banner of Wallman and Fabry and Husso and Perron.
Only Husso and Perron. Only Husso and Waldman.
Wow.
No Perron, because I was going to do the picture.
Uh-huh.
DP57. and I couldn't find it. But I did see that badass Ted Lindsay statue, which is one of the freaking coolest statues that I've ever seen. Also, too, I was going to buy a Wings shirt. I was, but I could not find the jersey with Perron on the back.
Oh, there you go.
So I can't.
Yeah.
And it just still felt
Feels weird.
real weird. But how do you do that, though, man? Because I just like hockey. Sometimes I like hockey players.
My dad, every time, because when I was growing up going to the games, he would always point out the jerseys. He's like, the San Jose Sharks jerseys, those teal greens, the Blackhawks jersey, which I couldn't believe he said it, and the Red Wings jersey. He's like, those are the three best jerseys with the Blues in the NHL. And he's like, Dad, what the hell are you talking about? It's the Red Wings and Blackhawks. But now that like you grow up and you get like an actual like understanding and appreciation for it, those are some pretty badass jerseys.
Okay, you guys, I don't know if you saw the thing yesterday from Carolina where the
Hartford
Hurricanes
Whalers
are going to wear not only the Whaler jerseys, but the Cooper, the pants, the hockey pants. I think that's awesome. But as I was reading this thread, not everybody thinks it's awesome. What do you guys think?
I love it. I mean, that's so cool. I mean, you got on
for a game.
People that are pissed off about it because we're the Hurricanes, we're not the Hartford Whalers. You don't have an appreciation for like the fact that you weren't the Carolina Hurricanes. You started as the Hartford Whalers. I love those. Frankly, I think those should come back every once in a while.
I like it, and you always hear that debate like you're putting on these what are essentially shorts, right? And everybody calls them hockey pants. So these are legit pants.
Yeah.
That's like when they went to they went back this season to the old school Arizona Coyotes jerseys. That was the best decision they could have ever made because I hated the one that was just the Coyote and they started making these weird like color schemes with it. Like go back to I forgot what they're called, but like go back to that original like Tyson Nash, Keith Tkachuk Arizona Coyotes jerseys.
Well, I made fun of the purple jersey.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was atrocious. And Phoenix and Arizona tweeted me back and said, imagine having this bad a fashion sense or something like that.
Well, then they saw our reverse retro jerseys, which I love, by the way.
You caught yourself.
That's all the red ones.
And then the only thing that I could fire back was something about winning a Stanley Cup. And then I was just like, oh, God. That's just a real lame friggin' response to getting friggin' schooled by the Arizona Coyotes friggin' media guy. But I just thought that jersey was stupid. I still think it's stupid, and I don't understand why anybody likes it.
It's just purple, all right, Donnie? You just don't like the color purple.
I think I'm just going back to being crabby. The longer the podcast goes, the happier I am. I have Blues hockey to watch tonight, but the more pissed off I am about the Bills. And then today, my favorite Bills podcast is going to be out, so I'm going to have to go back and listen to friggin' that. And then just the reality, my hands are starting to sweat for the love of Pete. I don't understand why I take this so seriously. I had this pit in my stomach last night. Like something really, truly bad had happened to me. Nothing bad had happened. My kids are healthy. My girl is hot. Everything is good. Life is good.
Hey, quick question on that. Do you ever wake up the next morning and your first thought, because you're barely conscious, and you say to yourself, didn't something bad happen last night? And I'll go, oh, it wasn't that bad. Never mind. Are you still waking up the next morning going, yeah, it was bad?
He's waking up till the next Sunday saying that was bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be sitting on this one for a couple days.
That was Denver.
And I don't even like, I just don't even know, man, I have not been, because like I'm very passionate about the Blues, obviously. But, like, I have not been this, like, worked up about anything, honestly, probably since the Stanley Cup run. Like, like game days are not happy days for me. They're angsty. Like, I should be enjoying this way more than I am.
It's also because the team's been kind of ass this season, so it makes it even more angsty, right?
Thanks for pointing it out, Alex.
Sorry.
Thanks,
Damn it, that's twice today. That was, once again.
All right, gentlemen, I think we're going to wrap this up. I got to go be on the radio. No. If that's all right with you.
Oh. Is that a flex?
It's a weird flex.
Not really.
JR's got to go be online, too.
Yeah,
so.
That's a very weird flex. I didn't mean for it to be that way. And if it was a very lame one.
Gentlemen, we got to wrap this up. I got to go work.
Right. I gotta do that. So, thank you guys very much for joining. It's an absolute pleasure to get a chance to do this. It's so crazy, Jeremy, when I am reading the articles that you write, and I'm like, holy smokes, I'm going to do a podcast with this guy tomorrow. Like, it's just unbelievable, man. You're really freaking good at what you do.
No.
Yeah, you are. And I'm gonna just fill this room with love. Alex, I know how tough the pre and the post game could be. Well, both of you guys, dealing with the team winning and losing and how the fans react to you. You guys just both do a hell of a great job.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I just don't know how Alex does it, where he's here at 9 a.m. for a podcast, and let's say the game was in Vancouver tonight, he'd be done about 1 in the morning.
That'll be Thursday for you guys. So when you see me Friday, I'll be like,
So wait though. So will you go home for a little bit?
Okay. Those late games I go home because then I can go home and do bath time with the girls. And
Donnie, then do the show 11 to 2 is BK and Ferrario. Then come back for pre. Then he's got the intermissions. Then do
the post games are the brutal ones.
Yeah,
post games, because especially like when things are like bad or like the game is like people want to talk about it, or if I have things that I want to say, I'm all hopped up on energy, and so it's like it might go a little longer. Oh shoot, it's 1:30 in the morning. Maybe I should wrap this one up. Grant Francis probably hates me most of the time because he's looking at me like, dude, really? Are we done? But Thursdays is a 9:30 start, so it's like,
dude, that's awesome. That's another one, man. And we have to get him in here at some point or the other. But Grant Francis, man, he's really good.
He's incredible.
He knows 20 times more about hockey than I do. That's for damn sure.
It's weird, too, because he's got this, like, window of knowledge. Like, you ask him, like, mid-2000 stuff, he's probably not going to remember it. But, like, from 2013 to 2019, he could tell you the dude that scored the goal in the second period and the exact time that he scored the goal. Like, Grant, what did you do for your life in 6 years? It's like, I watched hockey.
Well, yeah, he asked me a couple of Blues trivia questions. He was filling in on the morning show.
Yeah.
And so he asked me a couple of trivia questions, and I was like, I have no idea, dude.
And then he answers it like you're the idiot.
Dude, exactly. Yeah. He kicks it in just like that. I'm like, all right. I just want to let everybody know that I'm the music guy that also loves sports, okay? Okay. I'm not the primary sports guy.
Try being the Blues pre- and post-game guy, and he asks you the questions. He's like, you don't know this? I'm like, cool. Thanks, Grant. I'm just going to go in the bathroom and cry for a couple of minutes.
Dude, it's like that sort of thing, like when my kids ask me about music and I don't know the answer, and then my daughter kind of looks at me like, I thought this was your life. Like, I thought this is what you did. Okay, we will be back a little bit later on this week. I believe Mr. Jamie Rivers will be joining us for the next episode from the road. Thank you very much to Jeremy Rutherford, to Alex Ferrario. My name is Donny Fandango. We thank you for listening to the Last Minute Blues podcast. As always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.